Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. We continue with our conversation on Daybreak this morning as we unpack the Hustler Fund, its practicality, and what it will take to successfully implement this fund that is geared towards addressing the financial inclusion gap, especially for those who are in the lowest level of the economic ladder. And we are having a conversation in studio here, and we want you to be a part of it. We are asking you also, we want to hear your views and thoughts concerning this Hustler Fund that is yet to be launched today. You can engage us on social media at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Cheng, at Ayub Abdi Kadir. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Share your thoughts with us, and we'll sample them as we continue with this conversation. All right,
Honorable Sauko Bunyasi, coming to you then. We are in the midst of austerity measures as announced by the government in a circular dated 8th this year that targeted ministries and departments to institute sweeping austerity measures to cut down on cost. But this affects supplies in terms of services by the same target group, which is the micro, small and medium enterprises. I mean, when the government does not spend, yet you are targeting these small businesses through the kitty, how does it function? And these two positions conflicting?
They could if implemented badly, but actually they needn't conflict because you won't take money away from sterile sectors, so to say. People's personal travel, other expenditures, the largesse around the bureaucrats in this country is quite big, and you hopefully shift them to areas of activity. You put it to the frontier of the economic growth process. How that is done, for example, you remember some years back, we were told that big guzzlers and big cars no longer be available to the civil service, and they're all down for a little while. They're now all back, and we have the latest vehicles at government expense running around with the ministers and PSs and other bureaucrats. That failed. Again, this also depends how this is implemented. But the key thing is that this principle of leanness, which, for example, in the years past, Nyerere's cabinets used to succeed. They would drive around in Peugeot 404s, including those are also some of the cars on his entourage, by the way. Even in those days. And ours here were the latest Mercedes-Benzes, Mercedes 600, and we saw nothing wrong in it, despite that display of wealth in a country that was really struggling. So I think how well this is actually implemented and managed at the top level just depends on what kind of oversight can be put on it over these institutions generally and specifically in respect of this fund as well. But just a quick one, I must add, Yusuf, on this one, that I think the use of the word small, we start with small and medium, is probably even misleading in this case. I think micro is probably a better term. We are targeting a category that's not even small. It's really, really small, and we use that in this parliament.
Defined in law.
Yeah.
It's below 500,000 shilling turnover annually.
Yes.
Those they're called micros.
Micros, yes. That's going to be if we succeed, that's the area in which we shall succeed. The others, the small and medium, they will be a little bigger, have other opportunities, and we can discuss that. For me, I think it's part of the essential ecosystem that you must loosen up a lot more in the economy to make this bottom work. And we are waiting to see what sort of policies will shake up the system to make it consistent. For example, banks are going to put money from what they would have done to do this, but they still need money to do additional lending. What kind of access and ease do you put on them to enable them to access money markets, capital markets, to bring in and feed this pipeline? So that's going to come later, and maybe it's a discussion for another day. So here we are. We have only announced the intent. The real challenge is still ahead of us.
All right, Mheshimiwa Kuria, I mean, let me take you back. You said this is something that is going to be revolutionary. When it started, there was all indication that it was going to be a government grant for those who, are in the lower card of the economy. It transitioned to a zero-rated loan. At some point now we hear it's going to attract an 8% interest. I mean, how sure would we be as a country that we are not faced with a lot of gray areas that may hurt us in the course of implementing this fund that a lot has not been addressed yet that may just surprise us along the way?
I don't think there are any more surprises we expect. You know, as per the report by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the rate of inflation as at October 2022 was at 9.6%. So we're talking about an inflation rate of being 9.6%, and therefore when we're saying that the fee or the interest rate at this 8%, it's around 0.000, I think 0.0067. I might not be so accurate on that per day, and therefore this 8% just goes on to the administration of the fund. And again, we're focusing a lot about the Hustlers Fund, but let me tell you what. This discussion about opening up lending or increasing accessibility of credit to SMEs or to local managers has done. I think it was yesterday the Kenya Development Corporation and the Kenya National Chambers of Commerce said that they're introducing, I think, 5 to 10 to 100 million shillings loan to small and medium enterprises at very competitive interest rates, almost indicating that they'll be able to do that at 8%. So the discussion about this Hustlers Fund is, as a country, to the private sector, how do we make loans accessible at a cheap rate to people? And this is what we're starting with the Hustlers Fund. And I'm really praying that this project really succeeds. It is going to show even the private sector that you do not need all the bureaucracies to lend to these people. And to give us a different example, those people that, the boda riders, for example, if we have found people, and let me not call them unscrupulous, but let me call you shrewd business people that have realized to escape the financial net of registering as financial institutions, they're now directly selling these motorcycles to boda riders, but as a loan. And these boda people will pay for this loan until when they are just like 2 months to the end of the loan. If they default at that particular time, the owner of this or the seller is very quick to repossess them. And there's no protection of these people. You know, it's repossessed, they lose all the money that they have saved, or they're told if you have to get it back, then first of all, we're charging you a penalty of 10,000 shillings. And you're talking about, let us open this conversation about access to loan facilities for these people. And I think what you're going to see in the next few months is even a lot of the commercial digital lenders opening up their physical space, accessing loan facilities at better rates, at cheaper terms. And I'll take you back to...
But when you talk about that in terms of opening up the market, is what you suggest, does then this mean the funds will support consumer in terms of the loans in competition with commercial banks, for example, and mobile-based credit providers? Yes,
without fear of contradiction, is that this government fund is going to give competition to the private sector, to the private providers of the service. And when that happens, then the private sector has to react by changing the model in which they are lending. And for example, just to give an example, I think after discussion in Central Bank, there was this concession that was done for digital loans on all commercial banks. So by us starting to have a conversation that let's delist people from CRB, let us change the credit scoring for the people that borrow, that borrow. Let us make this accessible. We have had now banks sitting down and writing off their digital loans with the help of Central Bank, and therefore, it's opening up this space and making sure that no bank, no digital lender is going to harass the small and medium, the small and micro enterprises anymore, because you have to match what Hustler Fund is doing. And I'm really praying that it succeeds, so that when it's shown that it's possible and the fund is able to run itself, it's going to be sustainable, then it's going to again open up. You're going to find other quote-unquote Hustler funds by private sector, you know,
I get you
at a good rate.
On how this is opening up a much bigger conversation than just the Hustler Fund, that even the private sector is going to have to sort of mutate to fit what is there in the market currently. But Mheshimiwa Bilokero, I don't know whether it's me who missed something, but did it start as a loan? Did this conversation...
No. No. During the campaign pledge, it was a grant. And it's not unusual. Many countries give small and micro enterprises grants, from the US to Europe to every country. I mean, it's normal. Government do give grants to small enterprises. But I think, contrary to what, in my view, Mheshimiwa Kuri has said, I think it's the commercial, the other financial providers are the ones who have given the government competition for them to change that narrative from grant to a loan. Because
so the government is adjusting to...
It's the government that is adjusting, because I think you cannot, you know, I mean, it's very easy for the private sector or the commercial, these other competitors to tell the government, look, you cannot be giving free fund. We are in business.
Okay.
Yes, you're going to shut down our business. So you have to charge. And this is, I think, probably why the government changed. It's obvious. But I think the most important thing for the government is to be innovative in this fund. I like, for example, the suggestion the president made a couple of days ago that, you know, Twiga Foods will be given 300 million loan for its, you know, for its customers and so forth, so that they can have that liquidity to buy and so forth. So that some sort of innovativeness, I think, in this fund to make it different would be critical. The second thing is, I think, to appreciate that this is not going to be just a 50 billion loan at the end of the year. The figure would probably even go to as much as 500 to 1 trillion shillings, because it is the money that somebody will borrow today, pay back tomorrow, borrow another after 3-4 days, after another week. I don't think the average, this category of businesses, you know, micro, these are people who don't need money for more than 2-3 days. I mean, 100 shillings, 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings is not of use to you for a whole year. But it's something you can use today, return tomorrow, collect tomorrow, like that. I think it's, so the turnover of that lending is what Fuliza would say, 500, 600 billion. So this one also would probably, by the time, you know, you do a year, the figure would come substantial amounts of money. But I think that innovativeness is very important, so that we target, we don't just remain competitive with the Fuliza, but we target other things, other areas that those are the people are not funding.
Okay.
Because, for example, you're in Turkana, you want to buy some animals, you are in the areas in this country where things are not as straightforward as they are. When you're in Nairobi, you know, it's very easy to imagine how these things are done. But in some parts of this country, things are not so easy. And I think there's need to try and make it a bit more accessible in some areas through other platforms. I think that would make a lot of difference, and rather than just, you know, assume that everyone will be able to access. Accessibility is critical. And about SME, Mheshimiwa Kure, the issue has never been about the cost. It's about accessibility to finance. That has been the biggest challenge.
All right.
If you're a small businessman doing 100 million shillings and walk to KCB for a loan, you know, the collaterals required and the requirements make it difficult for you to access a loan. So the issue has been accessibility. Even with all the securities you have, it's sometimes very difficult for you to get a loan. Thank you.
We will come back, of course, also to hear your thoughts on the sustainability, Mheshimiwa Bunyasi, what it will take to make this Hustler Fund sustainable, and also to stay ahead of the pack when it comes to matters competition, even with the private sector. But let's get to hear what members of Parliament had to say yesterday. It was a heated debate concerning this Hustler Fund. Let's hear some of their views on it.
The regulations are fairly straightforward. It is beneficial to our members in our constituency, and many Kenyans are looking forward to borrowing this money, particularly the Mamambogas, the borders that are in Honorable Junet's constituency, who are borrowing from 500 shillings to 50,000 shillings. This will be the first phase. The second phase, Madam Speaker, we are informed of to roll out the second phase of between 250,000 and 250,000 will be done in the month of February, and the new regulations would be brought to cover that particular fund.
With the rate of inflation that you are seeing in this country today, almost double digit, with the economic crisis in the world, Madam Honorable Speaker, and you are talking here about financial inclusion, then you are saying the highest amount somebody can borrow from the Hustler Fund is 50,000 shillings. Madam Speaker, what business can you do with 50,000 today?
You are saying that we are giving 500 Kenya shillings, and out of these 500 Kenya shillings, there's an amount that is automatically removed, and then you have 8% again removed. What the hell are you remaining with, Madam Speaker? Even this money is not even enough to purchase the fund that it should be receiving this money, even if you are talking about Mulika Mwizi.
Members of Parliament there during the afternoon session of the National Assembly. And Honorable Sako Bunyasi, before I come to you, because we have also engaged Kenyans as to what they think about this. The idea that was politically a pledge, now it's launched today by the President, and one of the major pillars of the pledges that he made then as Deputy President and now with the full mandate as the President. So let's see the tweet from the Twitter handle at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is Daybreak, and this is what you are saying. And Reverend Harry _Kosgei says Hustler Fund is good to upgrade low businesses and thus for a large amount of money to individual credit score should come in place since there are people who borrow up to 1 million from banks and they pay. Otherwise, SACCOs and cooperatives works well. God bless.
Thank you, Reverend. Remy Butia, one of the biggest developments with the structure of the Hustler Fund is that it will now not just be a credit facility, but a savings vehicle too. It remains unclear if the funds will be transferred directly by the government. Athanas Mavuti1 says, those who are against the Hustler Fund do not mean well for the hustlers of this nation. The implementation of the Hustlers Fund is transparent and it will transform the lives of many hustlers in this nation. Kudos, he says, Mr. President. Godi Barasa Were, the architects of the Hustler Fund, should re-evaluate and fine-tune the kitty to ensure that the hurdles and limitations towards the hustler accessing the fund are removed. The fund must aim at lifting up those at the bottom. Thank you, Godi. And SRA says Hustler Fund will not per se solve anything. It attracts 8%, Uwezo Fund has 0%, but repayment is almost 40%. Where the funds come from indicates that it's someone's business ready to break. And those are your feedbacks on Twitter. Later we'll be sampling some of the other remaining on the Twitter hashtag Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya. Honorable Sako Bunyasi, may I then come to you, because this is very critical and there are questions Kenyans are asking as regards where the other elder siblings, the youth, Uwezo Fund, have, in the eyes of many Kenyans, failed to live up to the expectation, live up to the reality. Will the Hustler Fund then succeed in your view?
First of all, I know people are concerned that, this is a political promise. Now we are trying to anchor it somewhere. This mutation is something we should expect. The purely political space cannot anchor a fund. So when you bring it within institutions, then you face this reality. And I want to also reiterate what Honorable Bill Kerr said earlier. The cost of money is not the studies have shown globally that the cost of money is not the important thing at this level. This section of lending that we are talking about is the access issues, and that I think we have to keep that in mind. That's already demonstrated. The other thing, though, is that where the money goes and what it does cannot be tightly regulated anywhere in the world. Money is fungible. If it touches a household and there is hunger or there's that's why it will go fast before it goes something else. But the totality of this funding of making households a bit more liquid is really what we are seeking. And they will also make micro choices where they put the money, including putting the money on businesses as a means of it. Now, to get back to the point that you're raising, these older siblings, in my view, have not entirely succeeded in their mission. And part of it, as I said earlier, for example, around the Uwezo Fund, the administrative arrangements around it were unclear. That was one. And it was partially a way of quote-unquote helping, with the word helping meaning it's almost patronizing. These are people who can't manage, so let us give them, is this money going to be free? Should not be? That wasn't clear. Who do you pay it back to? I remember in my own constituency we had that difficulty. Who is going to collect this money? Or they said, the local officer of the Ministry of Planning, for heaven's sake. They have barely any money even to get out of their offices. They have no notion. And now, so there was a lot of things that were unclear. But in respect of this fund, in my view, we should just expect it to be additional money in this space that wasn't there before. How it will be used is going to depend on the quality of monitoring. And I want to conclude this on a note. Honorable Bill Okero mentioned Turkana, but I thought he didn't give the example I'm thinking about. But he reminded me of something, which is that if you operate in an area, if this fund was operating in an area that has been hit by drought, animals are dying, people are on the verge of starvation, or they're actually starving and so on, the fund should be used also as a grant. Get them out of that minimum. Then they can slowly get into the space in which you begin to charge them. That is creativity around the management of the fund. The bureaucrats who are going to manage this fund better not to be people who have got there purely because they have got degrees, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and so on. No, they ought to be people who come out of the trench, who know how you can get money and how you can get money to people of this kind. And I think it's going to be important. If we let people go hungry and we think that they'll invest in a business and then get out of that, that is a very long-term goal. You must first deal with today's needs and graduate out of it. Okay. So there's a lot can be done, from the shelves of innovation and creativity in the management of the fund. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm also looking at one provision here that says that all the products offerings will be delivered electronically and with no requirements to fill any manual forms or to secure any third-party guarantors. And as such, the Hustler Fund will be delivered without any bureaucracy. Of course,
I don't want to come back to it, but a very quick one. Okay. Yeah. They must not lose sight of what they can gain in strengthening the intermediation channels. People are now used to answering questions. We do that in surveys, in census, in fleas, and so on. They are transacting on the phone. And they can make an application on the form. Yes, there may be no paper, but that does not mean there should not be an application format, because you must know who your customer is. Mm-hmm. If you don't know them well today, by the end of next week, you must know them a little better than you did after 2 years or a year or so, our population will be well understood and their needs will be well met.
All right. The reason, and thank you for also your addition on that. The reason I brought that up is because, and this is to you, Mheshimiwa Kuria, if you look at what is happening in the private sector, the culture has been that such principles have helped to tame the defaulters and to just be careful not to have your institution lose money to those who don't want to pay back. If the government is going to offer such loans and remove some of these safety measures, how then are we sure that the money will come back? I'm concerned because this is going to be taxpayers' money we are talking about. It's not a private institution doing it.
Thank you very much. And I know that this is a big concern, but what the fund intends to do is leverage on the existing infrastructure by other service providers. For example, whether it is the banking platforms, whether it is a Safaricom platform, whether it's Telcom or Airtel. So what the fund is going to do, and I think it's very important that Kenyans get this, it's going to leverage on existing infrastructure. And also there has been a lot of data mining, I must say, across the digital space. And that's why I think last Parliament tried to pass something on data protection and how to manage all this data. But there is a lot of, especially the telecoms, have a lot of data on Kenyans. And that's why, if you do this example, Fuliza, that's why they determine, whether they're giving at this rate or that rate. And that's why even when you try to migrate, if you, for example, take one digital loan and try to migrate from that and take advantage and not pay that and go to the other, you are denied access. So the government is going to use the same platform. But with a rejoinder that instead of just removing you completely from the credit system because you're not being able, for example, to pay, is that let us introduce a credit scoring to you, so that the next time you are trying to access this particular fund, you get it at slightly higher, higher rate, and hopefully that will also stabilize the digital lending sector, and you're going to have more people honor their debt obligations. Okay. Because I must say, and I think we really need to change the narrative of this country. We need to have people be ready to honor their debt obligations. I've seen a lot of tweets, I've seen a lot of feedback, people saying, tunaingoja, quote unquote, tunaingoja namna hii ndio tupate nayo. But I think, especially to fellow young people of this country, that needs to change.
Okay.
We must change our culture to being able to honor our debt obligations.
Okay. Honorable Bilokero, then I come to you. And of course, as we also tackle the question on the hierarchy and the chairperson, the appointment, who makes the appointments, and at what points the CSS will be coming in. 72% of micro and small medium enterprises are from personal savings and or income. I mean, in terms of then sustainability, talking about, for example, the 2021 merger of creation of Beshara Fund, a kitty of about 2 billion Kenya shillings, which merged the Women, Youth and Uwezo Fund to provide loans at, for example, 6% rate, targeting women and youth in the country. I mean, how different is it? Because you look at very short shelf life of the money that Kenyans want to spend within the financial cycle in accessing this money and credit.
Okay. First, I think we need to be very clear that this money is for business. Never mind, what kind of business. Let us say, and in business, there's always profit and loss. If a Mama Mboga takes 500 shillings today to go and restock on her vegetables, and for whatever reason she makes a loss, it rained, she couldn't sell her vegetables, matatu rates have gone up, she's lost money. She can't repay that money. So when you find people are defaulting, it's not because they have stolen the money or they have decided to get married with it or gone into, it's not always that negative. It's sometimes businesses, people make losses, genuinely. And this is why people default. In the Fuliza now, NCPB, the NCB Bank, the other day wrote off about 11 billion. But the total non-performing loans for Fuliza so far, as of October, was only 30 billion. For the last 3-4 years, they've been giving loans. And, they have given trillions, because last year alone, they gave almost 580 billion. So it's not huge, but the government will ultimately have to also make a provision for writing off, at the end of every year. They have to. Otherwise, there will be a situation where credit scores or no credit scores, people will genuinely make a loss and they will not be able to service that loan. Now, on the way the fund will be managed, the structure of the board or not, for the ordinary Kenyans who will be concerned about the money. I don't think what happens out there is important to them. And the government has just said that there will be no bureaucracy. So out there, we don't want to know what happens, who is managing what, how is the board going to be appointed, who will appoint the CEO, the role of the CS and the accountability and the penalty. What is important is I want to go to my phone and collect some money. And I think for me that is the most important thing. But for the government, it is as usual. They must have that accountability, to Parliament, of how the fund is going to be spent, how the board will run it. They have to submit accounts. They have to report to the Parliament quarterly, monthly, and those things. And they have to also introduce some sort of innovativeness every year, every month. Come up with new ideas so that they can make the fund effective. That, I think, is what is more important. But I think for the SMEs in general, I think for the SMEs in general, the most important thing is that over the years, government has set up an SME authority, complete with an act of Parliament. But they have really not given much weight in terms of financial support. Absolutely. That SME authority is running around after donors looking for something to carry out its activities, assist jokalis and so forth. They have not been funded to carry out any activity, as a matter of fact. So I think what is important is that the government must come up with something significant in terms of how to assist that particular group. The people who have businesses start from 1 million and going up to 100 million, people who cannot grow their economy, they can't access. And what Kipra, that report by Kipra, which said, most of the SMEs are funded up to 80% now, or 86%, by families and friends. They don't have access to banks. The total amount of money lending by banks to SMEs in the 2020 financial year reported by CBK is only 20%. Out of the total loans given by all the banks in Kenya, only 20% has gone to SMEs. And out of that 20%, only 10% or so has gone to agriculture, which is the single most important sector that contributes to GDP. 80% of our people are on subsistence economy. They're out there in the farms, and you don't get access to funding. So I think there is a need for the government to come up with policies specifically directing the financial sector to allocate a certain amount of advances and loans to that sector. Okay. I think this is critical in this country.
Mheshimiwa Bunyasi, what safety lines should the government operate in when it comes to balancing between addressing the vulnerabilities of the target population, like Mheshimiwa Bilokero has rightfully highlighted, and also making sure that they sustain the fund, because it has to be sustained for it to be successful. What is it that will work for the government in this particular tricky balance?
I think the only thing I can say about that is that government must watch out carefully to understand what is happening around the fund, around the activities. So good monitoring would help to bring out the issues that require decision. And the innovative requirements of such an activity, especially at the lowest spectrum of those recipients, of the borrowers, might then dictate that if they find that the market, the aspects of the market that are not being tackled by the fund, they must do a modification midstream and as they go forward. We must, at the end of the day, distinguish between those users of the fund who are totally at the level of meeting daily consumption needs, and that's all for the time being they're most concerned about, and those who are already beginning to have a profit turnaround or a potential to make a profit and so on, that you want to be able to nurture and graduate them up through the systems until finally we shall be saying, now you no longer need this kind of funding, or they probably will quit themselves and go to commercial banks and other institutions that there might be. But to do that, we must do two things in my view. First, we must understand who these clients are. Data is important to collect and must be analyzed. The second thing, there must be clear understanding of the real economy. They are transacting, they are borrowing to do what? How is that economy functioning for this level of consumers, this level of borrowers, and so on? The real sectors, the economists would call it, is also very important, so that the policies that there are also supportive policies. If they may be in agriculture, they may be in small processing, they may be in distribution and transport. There are many things, and you then begin to look at those mother sectors, as it were, and see how well they function, in which these operations are taking place. So I think it's going to require, in my view, the old principle of, think deeply, report simply. Analyze deeply, give instructions as simply, like they do with agricultural extension. Very complex subjects, but they come out simply. That thinking must be accompanied into this whole process.
Okay. Honorable Kuria Kimani, one of the primary objectives that the President has underscored is that the country turns into resource-mobilized, productivity-led, export-oriented economy. But Honorable Kero mentioned only 20% of Kenyans have access to credit from banks. Of that, only a minutiae, a drop in the ocean of that amount goes to agriculture, which is the backbone of the economy. I mean, when you have such a big ambition to turn the country into an export hub, then doesn't this delay that dream, particularly for the government? And how consequential will it be in terms of the value of the shilling in the pockets of Kenyans?
Thank you very much. The Kenya Kwanza government is not trying to, per se, reinvent the wheel. We're talking about how do we make use of existing business models that have done very well, and how do we support now those smaller businesses that support this big business. And I'll give an example of what the president was able to do with, I think it was Trigger Foods, I think that the day before yesterday. This is such a successful business model, but again, why is it successful? We're talking about the expertise of its management, access to capital, existing structures, even the record keeping. Because I think one of the challenges also has been with the smaller businesses in terms of even access to credit. Because if they are not even able to keep proper records in terms of proper accounting, because if you ask them how much is your asset base, how much is your turnover, some of these businesses are not able to adequately even keep their records. But how now do we leverage on existing models that have worked? And how this, I think it's going to be the best success examples is they looked at trigger who are the vendors, because the vendors are these regular people who buy from the farmers and supply to the farm, and now accessing now this credit to these vendors so that they are able to increase their turnover in terms of transactions, and thereby, when they become now that organized, to organize them into organized businesses, and then aggregate them and connect them to an existing and successful enterprise, I think that is how we are going to grow it, because the successful or that exporter, for example, is not able to access if it is the products from the farm. So if that person who buys potatoes from my village in Kapsita, or who buys carrots or cabbages or whatever other products, is able to get through like a mainstream system and access accreditation of their products in terms of packaging, in terms of testing, in terms of standards, then we're going to find that product getting to export. But if we rely solely on this farmer or this middleman to do the exports, that's going to be, it's not going to happen.
More or less, you are painting a picture of bureaucracy.
No, yes.
Okay, that's this 6 to address. Okay, yes, sir.
I'm looking at some of the consequences of failure to adhere to some of the provisions that the fund has, like sort of a misappropriation of the fund or providing false information is going to attract a penalty of about 10 million shillings, a fine of 10 million shillings, or a 5-year jail sentence. I'm looking at this target group, and vis-a-vis 10 million or 5-year, this could be the breadwinner of the family. This could be the only source of income of that family. Is it even,
the proportional?
Yeah.
No, I thought those penalties are targeted to administrators of the fund.
The administrators of the fund, not the users.
It's the administrators, those government, that body that is going to manage.
Yes.
There's a tendency by government officers who manage such funds to try and divert part of the money. Those are the people to whom the penalties apply. For the borrowers, the penalties would be the additional interest rates. I think they have indicated they'll be charged more for the delay, and the credit scores that will put them negatively. But I don't think they'll get. They can. For the moment, I don't think that is clear. But knowing government, something will come up later. But I think the success of this fund will determine the legacy of this government, let me tell you. And they have to succeed in this or lose their name and their legacy, really. So this president has this thing. And number two, if you look at the political manifesto, the manifesto of this political party that is in power now, it's largely premised on the turnaround in agriculture. Everything about it is based on agriculture, the food, the cost of living, the employment, agribusiness, value addition, and so many things. Everything is anchored on the success of agriculture. And that is a sector that is not being financed by banks for whatever reasons, because banks consider them to be risky. And so I think it will be interesting to see what specific models of assistance in terms of financial access that this government will come up for that sector. Because even this Kenyan TC, the Kenya National Trading Corporation thing, is about trading. Much of this Fuliza and other digital service providers credits is for trading mainly. Agriculture, people who need to buy, seedlings, who need to plow, they need to plant, they need to harvest, they need to sell. I think agriculture is where we need a lot of support. And this is why Agricultural Finance Corporation was put up. There were a lot of financial institutions that were set up that have not succeeded. Okay. And I think they need to do something. That is another thing that will define their legacy. If they fail in agriculture, the cost of living will shoot up. The president said, give me a year. I'll work on agriculture and you'll see the price. But you cannot just do that, without addressing that issue of access to credit.
Okay, Honorable Bilokero, before I proceed to Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, it's very critical that we observe this, and the economy was the organizing factor in the 2022 polls. And it doesn't matter who is in power. I mean, Kenyans want an improvement in the economy, rebooting post-COVID-19 pandemic, and to the path of prosperity. But when you have them not feeling the value of the shilling in their pocket, concerns over the plummeting of the economy, Can that quick fix be made by the administration? And given the challenges that the government has highlighted and went into hive of 300 billion Kenya shillings from the budget, will this be practical? Will this be realizable?
I think my colleague has mentioned, but in a recession, the economists would tell you it's advisable to not to have austerity measures in place, because the more you spend, the more you increase aggregate demand, so that the economy would grow. But this is a situation where debt has become a major issue, because every shilling we are spending, or every 100 shilling we are spending, about a third of it is borrowed money. Because 2/3 of it goes to servicing of loan. And so the government has to balance, and I think this is why this austerity is critical, not because of anything else, but because of the issue of the pressure of the debt. And yesterday, the CS Finance was categorical that we don't have any more headroom. I can't borrow any more. And the president has every trip he has gone out, he's been signing on to loans. He signed on to a loan, 120 billion in Korea. He went to COP27, he signed on to some 500 billion with the British, whether it's public partnership or whatever, but they're all commitments that will be undertaken or guaranteed by government. So I think the economy needs to be turned around, and more than anything else for the Kenyans, who are the majority of the ordinary Kenyans, it's the cost of living. And the cost of living can only be addressed if fundamentals of the economy can be addressed. And I think the government has, in my view, really not looked at some of the critical issues in the economy. That would make things different. This would help the fund, of course, but I don't think if you ask somebody 3 months ago where he was in terms of his situation and today, in terms of joblessness, in terms of the cost of living, those are the fundamentals, and nothing has changed much for him. He's still buying the unga at 213 or 230. He's still finding, he has to pay his school fees. It's still growing. It's increasing by the day. The university fees are increasing. You want them to increase the NHIF. You want them to increase the NSF. This demand, the government is saying double the tax collection. You cannot really, in my view, all those things about more taxes and more collections should be deferred until the economy is back on track.
Yeah. Which reminds me of another conversation we were having recently about school fees, going back to what was before the COVID era. So parents have really been crying foul over that. But that's for another day. Mheshimiwa Bunyasi, should the government go beyond the Hustler Fund? Because what's the point of having easy access to a loan and then you end up paying a huge chunk of it to the multiple licenses, the tax and the bribes that, the small traders are forced to pay just to stay in business? Should we think bigger in terms of helping that micro, business?
Yes, and it must. I really hope they will. I think that we're probably in this space because of the political promises and the interest to show that we are, as we came to power, we have hit the road running and we are meeting our political obligations that we made, political promises that we gave. But it must go bigger. It must go deeper. It must expand in all dimensions. And I hope that's what they're prepared and gearing up to do. We shall see some of that as they come out with the budget policy statement, as they begin to structure their first budgets, because the budget is what tells you in terms of policy or expenditure where money will go, and therefore where your real priorities might be that you are not coming out with. I do hope that they have this bigger intention. I also said earlier that for even things like intermediations like this of Hustler Fund and similar on small and medium enterprises to work, the rest of the system must be shaken up. The financial sector must be the capacity to capitalize various levels must exist so they can be able to support, they support here, they can support themselves later by, for example, accessing even bigger funds locally, internationally, and so on. Corruption must be clamped down tightly, and so on. So the bureaucrats don't end up being the biggest beneficiaries of these funds. If you allow officially for poor data collection, you'll not even be able to account who received money, or if anybody did. It could only be fictitious. So this has to be tightened. The small things begin to matter. Okay. So the many things matter. So, and it's a very big space. I hope that government will come out and say so.
Honorable Kuria Kimani, because we talked about the penalties for the administrators of the fund and talking about the culture of corruption and its corrosive consequences on the growth of the economy. We are talking about more than 600 billion Kenya shillings as a result of financial leakages and the money siphoned out of state coffers. And this is 14 times the Hustler Kitty Fund. That is 50 billion Kenya shillings. And twice or 2 times the 300 billion Kenya shillings the government is seeking to save on the financial year. How important is it then that the state and the government here, with lesser-like attention, focuses on corruption, even as it rolls out this fund, and make it a major item as part of its agenda if it were to grow the economy?
You know, thank you very much. I think from the word go, the president has been clear on his decision on fight against corruption. And this is a decision as a country must make. It's an adjustment we need to make in our lives. It is an adjustment we need to make in our economy, in our country, and in all the independent institutions. Because if we get it wrong, I think the former president had said at some point that we're losing 2 billion shillings daily. So if that were true, and if that is what is going to happen, then we're not going to have a country anymore. And so it is in everyone's interest, and I'm certain that it is in this government's agenda, it's in the president's mind every time we have even our parliamentary group sittings, that we must end the culture of corruption. And the way to do that is also to allow the independent institutions to make sure they're in place. Where Parliament is supposed to play the oversight role is to make sure that there's no any shielding of anybody, whether it's a cabinet secretaries or any government official, against any corruption matters. And perhaps that's what even has informed even the changing of our standing orders to allow cabinet secretaries to come and answer questions directly to Parliament. Because what has happened in the previous regimes, there has been a sort of protection of, if you are rated so-and-so, if you are very close to power, then there's that protection. There has also been weaponization of the government agencies to score political differences. And if that really comes to an end, then I'm absolutely certain that this country will move forward. And I'm also looking at forward to the report on the 300 billion shillings austerity measures that this government is going to do. And if that becomes a success, then we know that we did not need that 300 billion shillings in the first place. And therefore, if we become disciplined then in our expenditure, then we're going to be disciplined. We don't have to borrow, as much as we're borrowing. We do not have to have all those punitive taxes. For example, one of the discussions that you've started.
In your view, will the begging bowl culture end with the government?
Will they?
The begging bowl culture?
Yeah, that will certainly end. Once we for example, introduce like the national tax policy, because if you're giving a minute to indulge that a little further, one of the biggest problems we've had with compliance with our tax laws is because they have been changing every time. Today you're paying this particular rate of tax, then you don't know what rate is going to pay in the next 3 months or the next 6 months. And if now we have that national tax policy that streamlines, that makes our tax regimes predictable and effective, and to a rate that's comfortable for both, to a rate that is both understandable and comfortable with both the person who is paying the tax and the person collecting the tax, and not just closing the business because they've not honored their one obligation. I think this country will be able to collect more, and we're going to move forward.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for that. And of course, we have not been having this conversation alone. We want to have a chance to also look at what you have been saying on social media, that is at Citizen TV Kenya. And we have there at Ras Bashir Were 1, you say 50K is a lot of money if well used. Congrats to our president. My fellow youths, let us use the Hustler funds well. Thank you for that.
Coco Solomon says, sincerely, the Hustler Fund will be a game changer for Mama Mboga. The interest rate should be lowered a bit and middlemen watolewe kabisa. This is a thumbs up for President Ruto.
All right, at Sawe, you say Hustler Fund target those youth blacklisted by CRB. What will make them pay this specific fund if they didn't pay the previous, I think, loans? They will get between 500 to 50K. What kind of business will one start to pay back? Critical questions.
That was an issue also addressed by Honorable Bilokero and Honorable Bonyasi Sakwa. MPs are yet to pass the supplementary budget, says Gaita Dex. Where are we outsourcing the Hustler Fund being launched today? Someone is doing business with Kenyans in the name of the government.
At MC Rumaz, you say Hustlers Fund is a brilliant idea. If it will be implemented well, it will improve micro, small and medium enterprises. But let's hope we will not have a Hustlers Fund scandal, just like Kimwarer and Aror and the KEMSA scandals. Another scandal in waiting. That's what a Kenyan there hopes it's not.
The question of corruption.
Your body language, Mheshimiwa.
Yes.
No, I'm not worried about that. I don't think there will be that kind of a situation. Because then that's why I said this thing will define the legacy of this government. If they make a mistake on this one, they'll be down. But I think it's good to be hopeful. But let us not think of criminalizing Kenyans for failing or defaulting on these loans. You know, there's that tendency to find if the small people default, it's a big thing. But when, we are pumping tens of billions into KQ, or to Kenya Pipeline, or Kenya Power, and all those things, or you're writing off Korea's huge coffee farms, you're writing off their debts, 2 billion, 3 billion, the tea farms, or you give fertilizers to his tea farmers. Those things all those subsidies are not, all those grants and subsidies are not a big deal, but for these small people, when we give 50,000 and they don't pay, it becomes a big issue. And let's hope Parliament will not lose sight of the fact that these are the Kenyans whom we need to support. Whatever the situation. Thank you. Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the government to engage with its citizens. For a long time, a lot of our planning did not really worry too much about the low end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So I really hope that they will do so, and they will do so rigorously, transparently, so that we can systems can grow and mature, and to make it easier for everybody, including themselves. But this is not going to be something that the president will launch and turn his eyes away from it. If he did, it may face the fate of very many things that we have funds we have established, and the failure can come from greed and corruption. You might find that the real net beneficiaries are the administrators of this, and I'm not in any way accusing the specific people, but just as a general principle, we know this is what we have suffered in many cases. So I do hope that along the line, the president will keep his eye on it. Lastly, we have the debt issue. This national debt question is big. We battled it in the last parliament. I had a bill that was resisted every inch of the way for different reasons. Now it's time really to reflect on it again. Otherwise, all these other initiatives will be killed, will be stymied at the start.
All right, Mheshimiwa Kuria.
Let me start by congratulating this president and this government, because for the very first time we have a government that has seen we've seen action in terms of honoring their campaign promises. This Hustler Fund, I still believe, will be revolutionary. I have seen what a fund like Women Enterprise Fund has done to my constituents. I've done how small groups that were doing table banking have been able to transform into poor households to improving their incomes in the family. I've seen a SACCO come up in my constituency called Tayari Women SACCO that started with a loan of 100,000 shillings from Women Enterprise Fund. They're now able to, their loan book is now around 10 million shillings. I've seen some women at Posta who used to sell what we call minji, and now they have been able to create a removing fund of around 1 million shillings, and that really has transformed in terms of their business, in terms of their access to loans when they need to pay school fees and when they need to buy stock. And I'm hoping that this now will even go further to younger people who do not want to fill the forms and all that. And now with either a smartphone or even without a smartphone, with the USSD code, they're able to access these fees. And we're hoping that they're going to repay it and repay it in time. And this fund will be going to be sustainable and nobody is going to touch this Hustlers Fund.
Thank you so much. Honorable Kimani Kuria, Member of Parliament, Molo constituency from the county of Nakuru. Your time is appreciated. Honorable Sako Bunyasi represented Nambale constituency in the last parliament. Honorable Bill Okero was the pioneer senator, the county of Mandera, and as well a political economist. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and company. And so timely is the discussion, and the launch will be happening later in the day. You'll be getting the live update when the president takes to the lectern to officially launch the Hustlers Fund.
Indeed, and we will be bringing you details about how that is going to pan out, but going by existing evidence is that the success of such programs is tied to sustained training and coaching of entrepreneurs, so we hope that that also will be factored in at some point so that this targeted group also know and have the skills on how they can invest, and they can also have ideas on opportunities to put their money to. My name is Safina Chieng Oma. Thank you so much for creating time for Daybreak this morning.
And thank you to you too for waking up with us. Your time is all appreciated and worthy. We cherish you because you woke up with us, you are on time, and Daybreak has been on air. I am Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. We'll see you tomorrow morning here on the broadcast. Good morning.